Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Thriving Relationship Show. I am your host, Christine Eartheart, founder of the Center for Thriving Relationships. And I am so grateful and excited to have you here and to get to support you in experiencing more love, connection, and understanding in your relationships. And my beloved husband, Brett, and I oftentimes talk about how keeping our hearts open and being in a conscious relationship is its own spiritual practice. And if you are someone who longs for depth, for wisdom, for soulfulness, and for heart in your relationship, you are in the perfect place, because we are so deeply honored and fortunate to have with us one of the most prolific and cherished spiritual teachers and writers of our time, Mark Nepo. So I am so thrilled to introduce you all to Mark. Mark is the author of the cherished #1 New York Times bestseller, The Book of Awakening, as well as more than 20 other books, including his most recent Surviving Storms, Finding the Strength to Meet Adversity. Mark has been called one of the finest spiritual guides of our time, a consummate storyteller, and an eloquent spiritual teacher. His work has been translated into more than 20 languages, and he's been recognized and featured countless places, such as on Good Morning America and as one of Oprah's Super Soul 100, a group of inspired leaders using their gifts and voices to elevate humanity. Mark devotes his writing and teaching to the journey of inner transformation and the life of relationship. Welcome, Mark. What a blessing to have you here with us.
Oh, well, thank you. That's so kind of you. It's great to be with you.
And I'll share this particular book is how I was introduced to your work, and it still has the note from a dear friend who gifted this to me on my 30th birthday. I'm now almost 42, and there is no book that lives on my altar more than this one. It has been such a constant companion, and the number of yoga classes and women's circles and workshops where people have read from this book are countless. So you have a way. Just thank you so much for answering your calling and using your gifts. So you speak right to the heart and soul of humanity in just a really exceptional way. It is so special.
Well, thank you. And you know, let me start with, because one of the learnings from that book speaks to the heart of relationship for me. And you know, that is very kindly, as you have, often people will say, gee, that, you know, that entry for that day felt like it was written just for me. And of course, you know, that's very touching, but I'm not that smart. I can't figure that out. But what it's a tribute to, more than my writing, is, you know, one of the things that I learned by retrieving and giving voice to that book is I only went to it when I was in my heart. If I drifted up into my head, I would stop and start the next day. And when we speak from our heart, that authenticity, because at the center, where we meet in the center. So when I speak from that place, of course, when any of us do, then it touches us, others, in that same center. And that is really at the heart of relationship, whether it's marriage or friendship or family. That's why it's so important to have the courage to be tender and honest and vulnerable, because then we drink from the same eternal well.
How deeply beautiful. Yeah. So can you share more your journey of becoming such a devotee of the heart and shifting from maybe living more in the mind to this place of universality where we can really reach the hearts of others? What inspired you?
Well, sure. You know, I think that, you know, in when I look back, in a few weeks, actually next week I'll be 72, which when I was young I thought that was ancient. It doesn't seem so old now. I think my father, who's now gone, but he used to say, old is always 10 years out from where you are. And but you know, when I look back, even as a boy, before I had any language for speaking from the heart, or for poetry or metaphor, the world always spoke to me very essentially, and touched my heart, and through metaphor, even before I knew what that was. And so, but then when I got to high school, my first love, our first loves are always so big. Um, and she was a year older than me. And then, of course, when she went on to college ahead of me, she went in a different direction and left and broke my heart, and I was devastated. And I began to write, um, as a way to heal from that. I wasn't a loner in high school, but I didn't know yet what true friendship was, or intimate friendship, till I got to college. So I began writing, and as I started to heal, I started to realize I wasn't just talking to myself. I had begun a conversation with life and with spirit and the universe, and stayed in that conversation. And now we move further till, my late 20s, and I was teaching at the University of Albany um, when I found myself thrown into the world of cancer. And I went through 3 years where I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma. And a couple of things happened during that, of course. I was turned inside out and upside down. And while I always was heart centered, I think at that point before my cancer journey, I was very much in my head. And through no wisdom of my part, but being so upended and turned inside out, everything dropped into my heart. And so on the other side of that, my mind has always served my heart and not the other way around.
Mm.
And on the other side of that, this was a great lesson for me in giving and receiving, in relationship, that saved my life. And I was blessed to have people from all faiths and all traditions offer me some kind of help, kindness, blessing. And so on the other side, I was raised Jewish. I have a great tie to the Jewish heritage, but I'm a student of all paths, because on the other side of almost dying, I realized that I was not, and still am not, wise enough to know what worked and what didn't. And so I was challenged and asked and called to believe in everything.
Mm.
And so ever since, all my teachings, all my books, all my work, I have been a student of all paths, devoted to that unnameable center that lives in each of us, to the unique gifts of each path, um, and to how we each have to find, where does that work in our life. I've come to understand that the poet in me sees, and the philosopher in me tries to understand what I see. But it's the cancer survivor in me that says, okay, how is this going to help us live?
Mm.
How is this going to help us live? If we can't look into that, then what's the point? It doesn't work.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey. And I thank you also for sharing just that this is universal. So no matter anybody tuning in, what your spiritual or faith or religious background may be, this is there. And I know you are such a proponent of all of our own uniquely intimate personal journeys with that spiritual source for each one of us. And I
Yes.
wonder, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So in relationships, so I mentioned at the beginning, Brett and I oftentimes talk about that as, in some ways our partners, right, can be one of our greatest spiritual teachers, and our relationship can be such a spiritual path if we allow it to be. It can be many things, and it can really be that if what arises, we're really using it to awaken. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit about how can relationships really serve as part of our spiritual path?
Well, I think that, yeah, so I think let's go back to, I mentioned first love. And so one of the things that happens, which is very archetypal, that is, it happens to everyone, but the details may be different, but we all move through these passages. So often in first love, someone sees us for the first time, truly. And that introduces us to our own worth and to parts of us that we haven't yet even been introduced to. And so it's so touching and overwhelming that often in first love, and I did this too, we mistake that the person who has seen us and loved us, um, that, oh my God, they've shown us our light and they have the switch to our light, which is, of course, not true. So often in first love, in a very kind of self serving way, we say, oh my God, I can't let them out of my sight because they got my switch. I got to be with them everywhere. They've got the key to my light. And of course, that's not true. One of the greatest ways we learn over time that we can honor being seen and loved is to own what that love reveals to us about ourselves. And the greatest respect we can have is to care for our own light once someone has loved it into the open.
Oh,
So this is the first, I'd say thing about relationship and being loved. And there's a great it's the last entry in the Book of Awakening where I speak and lift up this ancient, which is still today, this ancient greeting from the Bushmen in Africa. And when one would leave the tribe to hunt or gather or travel or whatever it might be, upon their return, for the first time someone in the tribe would see them return home, start to appear, they would point and say, I see you. And the person coming would go like this with their hand and say, I am here. I see you. I am here. And this bearing witness is essential. I think it's at the heart of all therapy. I think it's at the heart of all relationship, is that we need, because the daily harshness and trippings of circumstance and experience make us forget who we are, make us temporarily not know where we are or who we are. And so one of the bearing witness is to say, I see you, and to go, oh yeah, oh, I'm here. Or sometimes we have to say, hey, I'm here. And then you go, oh, yes, I see you. And this is not a one-time thing. This is a vow. And it brings up a vow that I think is essential to relationship. And that comes from the word honor, which is, I'm often very interested in the origins of words, not because I'm a word geek, but because I've learned over time that words, like pieces of nature, they erode over time. And so often when we go back, their original wholeness carries much more meaning and depth and are much more useful. And honor is a great word. The word honor literally means to keep what is true in view. To keep what is true in view. So in my relationship with my wife, Susan, we honor each other by keeping what we know about each other in view, especially like if I'm for some reason insecure this week and I have lost track of myself, then she honors me by saying, hey, I see you. Remember who you are. It's okay. It'll pass. By keeping what is true in view. And in this way, we also befriend life. We keep what we know about life to be true in view. So I invite people who are with us today. In what ways do you honor the people you're in relationship with? That is, in what ways do you keep what you know to be true about them in view? But there's another thing that's so important about, my wife Susan is a potter, and she's an old soul. So she is 18 years younger than me. She's in her 50s, and we've been together 20. I think 28 years. 28 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and well, thank you. And that I think one of the key things about intimacy is that, of course, we know each other extremely well. I know her so well I can finish her sentences, but I don't. Not just because that would be rude, but because part of intimacy is waking every day and in some way saying to each other, I know so much about you, but who are you today?
Mm.
You have the right and gift to change your mind, to change your heart, to evolve, to grow. So I know you felt deeply about this, but the question is, do you still feel that way today? What is new for you today? What has evolved for you today? How can we know each other more now? And I think this is also something I wrote about in the Book of Awakening, but I think it's very profound about the nature of relationships and about uh, the unrealistic, romanticized expectations we have in the modern world. We think when we find someone who's our soulmate or our partner, that now we're going to be all things to each other. Well, my experience at least is, and I've learned this from Susan, who is, like I said, is a very old soul. We learned this early on, is that no, actually, we're human and we're limited, and while we're devoted to each other, we can't be all things to each other. And this is important to accept, because if I insist on that, I can actually do harm. Imagine you and I are, and this is just a very, concrete example, but we can transfer it, is, so imagine we got to move the refrigerator. We're getting a new refrigerator and we're moving the old one out into the garage. And we start lifting it. And you say, are you able, have you got your end? And, I have to be honest. I can't just say, oh, sure, I've got it. Because if I can't carry that, I could drop it and hurt you. So, as much as I want to be there all the time, I have to actually be honest about what my limitations are, so I don't drop something on you and meaning well hurt you. And I think, early on in our relationship, probably, I don't know, years ago, decades ago, but somewhere in the first 10 years, I can remember being upset about something and needing to process with Susan, and she happened to be at that moment, pretty exhausted, and she said to me lovingly, I know you need to be heard right now, but I can't do it, and maybe tomorrow. And if you need someone now, maybe you should call one of your friends right now. And I remember in the moment being, kind of hurt that she couldn't be there. Um, but that was very important, because she was actually loving me more accurately and deeply by saying, look, I may not be able to hold what you're bringing, like the refrigerator right now. So if you need it right now, we need friends. We need a net of care. And we can't be all things to each other, much as we want to be. Much as we want to be. So there's a great story that I talk about in the Book of Awakening that's very profound. It's a small poem by William Butler Yeats called The Mermaid. You can Google it. And while I can't recite it, the essence of the poem is imprinted on my heart. It's so profound. And so in this poem, he talks about a mermaid who has fallen in love with a boy, a lad, on shore. And she's so just, I finally have someone who sees me, who understands me. Oh my God. And she wants him to see where she lives in her depths now, so and in the poem she takes him underwater to show him. And one of the lines is she gives him a deep and passionate kiss. And the line is, in cruel happiness he drowns. Oh, it's a tragic poem. However, what's opened there is very profound about the nature of relationship. The mermaid lives in the water, she can visit the land. The boy lives on the land, he can visit the water. So, where is the real relationship? It's on shore. And so, rather than this romantic insisting, oh my God, now that you love me, I can bring you to my innermost depths and share what no one else can see with you. Well, not only is that unrealistic, but it's actually could be dangerous, because while every one of us has a unique and personal depth where we commune with the essence of life, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, Dharma, there's 1,000 names. No two portals to that depth are the same. And so where I go for that may not be the same place you go. And if I insist on bringing you there, you might drown. So now the commitment to relationship is different. Now it is, oh no, I can share from my depth, but it's incumbent on me to bring what I want to share up to the shore where our relationship exists. What a difference. And so, I can share a moment in my long, beautiful life with Susan, of where, again, through her wisdom, again, I'm blessed to be prolific, and that is often because over the years I have learned to get out of the way, and writing is really about listening and taking notes. And I write about what I need to learn, not what I already know. Because if I wrote about what I know, I would have written very little. So years ago, I went to share something that I had written. And Susan said, wisely, she said, well, of course I'm interested in what you write, but you have to decide, do you want me to be your reader or your partner? And I was taken aback and instantly knew, oh no, I want you to be my partner. And I have to bring up to the shore of our relationship and be selective about the things that matter, that I want to share, that impact our intimacy and our relationship. And likewise, as a potter, I can't be in the depth of her creativity. She brings what she wants to share from there. So this is a very profound shift in what relationships can be, and how we honor both the limitations and the uniqueness of our own depth.
I love that so much, Mark. So I love what you were saying early on, just getting to be that mirror for our partners, to that loving mirror to bring us back to ourselves, to help us see ourselves even more clearly when we forget that our partner, that we can be that for one another, is what an amazing gift. And then also that practice of every morning we wake up, to greet our beloved with an open heart and with new eyes, and allowing us just to be connected to who we are in that present moment rather than who we were yesterday or months ago or years ago, so we can keep just evolving into the truth of who we are. So I love that. And this story, which you speak a lot of and write a lot about, is that dance between being deeply connected really in the world and also really going to that place, that unshakable foundation, that place of infinite peace and love in the center of our being. And it's just what you're saying. I just want to really highlight that, because I think that's so profound, that we can be so intimately connected to someone, so supportive, and not depend entirely on them for all of our needs. And I found in my own relationship with Brett is that the way to feel freedom and spaciousness around not looking to him to meet all my needs is my spiritual practice. It's having that relationship, that connection, one that is so close, a place where I can go and be held and heard and just bask in, the peace and guidance, whatever it might be that I'm looking for, maybe from Brett, like that is available. And I wonder if you could speak to that, because you speak so much to that. And for anybody tuning in that maybe is wanting to be both true to their partner and also true to themselves, connected to another and also deeply connected within, any insights you have on the journey to find that place?
Certainly. So let me start with there's a wonderful paradox that comes from Plato. He said, we are born whole, but we need each other to be complete. We are born whole, but we need each other to be complete. And so we are born with everything we need, but it doesn't come alive in a certain way until we are in relationship. And so this, in the Hindu tradition, there is a term upa guru, which means the teacher that is next to you at this moment. There's always a teacher next to us at every moment. And so and often they're not human teachers. And so to talk about relationship and this kind of movement from inwardness into the world and back, and in relationship, and from solitude. Okay, so I want to talk about whales and dolphins as upagurus, as teachers.
Oh, yes.
These magnificent creatures, they're actually air-breathing creatures. So because they're so huge and magnificent, they can stay under a long time. They can't stay there all the time. So as deep as they can go, and as much as they might want to stay in the depth, they have to break surface to breathe, or they will drown. They also can't stay out of the water indefinitely because they need to be immersed in the deep. Their actual body has to feel the water to keep living. So if they stay out of the water, they will die. Well, this is a beautiful way to understand the rhythm between solitude and relationship. So the question isn't, are we going to be alone or together? The question is, what's your personal rhythm? What's your balance? So right away, one question for those who are with us is, what is your right now? Are you too much in the deep and alone, or are you too much in the world? What do you need to balance? So whales and dolphins have this tremendous rhythm between breaking surface, you got to be in the world, and going back to renew in the depths. And this is held as beautiful that Pablo Neruda, the great Chilean poet, has a great line about relationships. He says, "You didn't come into my house that I would tear off a piece of your life. Perhaps when you leave, you'll take something of mine, chestnuts, roses, or a surety of roots." We will, you didn't come here for me to tear off a piece of your life. Perhaps when you leave, you'll take a surety of roots with you. And in the sense of solitude, Rilke, the great poet Rilke, has a line in one of his poems that says, "I was alone, but not alone enough to make every moment holy." So these are the challenges when we're in that depth that where no one can go. We have to be alone enough to make every moment holy, to drink from that universal presence. And when we're together, we have to give each other a surety of roots. So this is a remarkable journey. And I've learned over time, when someone loves you, they want you to grow, not stay the same. And so how do we do that? We dive into that solitude, that communion with the essence of life, and then we come back. Because when we go into that place of solitude, we renew our presence, our direct experience of life, and how rare it is to be here at all. But life is so much more than just my experience. And this is why we need each other. So when I come back into relationship, now I experience meaning, which is, if I'm present enough, I can experience your presence. And that gives us meaning. But there's another story that I tell in the Book of Awakening that that speaks about sharing, honoring and sharing each person's right to dive into the deep. And this comes from how pearl divers in the Middle East, one of the great pearl beds in the world is Qatar, off the coast in the Gulf of Qatar, and off Saudi Arabia. And before there were boats and GPSs and mechanical things that would net, and dig in the deep, simply two people would go out in a boat. Might be a husband and wife, might be brothers, might be a father and a son, but they would go out to dive for pearls. And what they would do is, one would stay in the boat and tie a rope around the other's waist, and they would have sink stones to help them sink to the bottom, but not so much that they couldn't come back up. And they would go down and look, hunt, dig in the deep for treasures to find the pearls hidden in the bottom. And the other in the boat, so that the one diving would be completely free to immerse themselves, they would count the time they had to breathe. And then when they was ready, they would tug the rope and they would know, oh, I got to come back up and get more air. This is a beautiful metaphor that speaks about our responsibility to each other, our commitment to each other in terms of diving inwardly and being in the world. So what trust? You are entrusting your entire life to your partner to count the time you have. So that means that when I'm working on a book and I'm deep into it, Susan agrees to count the time that week by paying the bills and doing the dishes and, shopping for the groceries. And then I can dive deeply and then saying, okay, it's time to come up. And then when I come up and I'm all excited with what I've found, then, she says, by loving herself, that's wonderful. And now it's my turn. Next week, I'll be in the studio diving in the deep, and you pick up shopping and doing the dishes and paying the bills and walking our dog. And it's important that there's equity in supporting each other to dive into the deep.
These stories are so incredible, and you are a master of metaphor and tying these into relevant things for all of us. And what a beautiful invitation of reflection. Do we need to go into the depths more, or is it more time to really engage? And also just this taking turns of kind of leading and following, supporting and being supported. And that is such a theme in your work, is finding that balance and doing that dance and honoring all of it. And so listening, I love the title of your one book about there being 7,000 ways to listen. And so much of what you're saying now, it's like that listening to ourselves, our own hearts, listening to the presence of life, and also coming to really listen to one another. And so can you share more about listening and what that means to you and what that means for relationships? Because I find, the work that we do when we're have the great honor of supporting couples, so often the disconnect and the misunderstandings, it really happens because there's been innocently, but an absence of really listening. And I know you perceive listening in such a profoundly deep, wise way. And I would love for you to share any reflections you have on that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things about listening, which has been such a great teacher for me. And the first is listening with our heart, not just with our mind. Because when we listen with our heart, we're present and we don't know what we're going to hear and we don't know what we're going to say. So listening, we have this phrase to know by heart, and we think in the modern world, oh, that means we're memorizing something. That's not what knowing by heart is. Knowing by heart isn't memorizing, it's allowing our heart to be touched. To be touched. Then things live in our heart. And so when I listen to you with my heart, Thomas Merton, the great Trappist monk, was a great writer. And he said, if we truly beheld each other, we would fall down and worship each other. If we truly beheld each other. And so this is when I listen with my heart, this is where, I can walk by someone at work, wherever work may be, or someone I see all the time who I have a good relationship with. And then one day when my heart is open and their heart is open and our eyes meet, I go, oh my God, it's you. I never realized it. Oh my God. Now I really see who you are, not just a surface moving by. So listening with our heart, to me, calls for us, and this is a practice, that again, all these things, what I share are examples, not instructions, and we all struggle to live these things, and because we're human, we can't do them all the time. But I invoke this practice of what I call staying current. That is, we're sitting at dinner and we have friends over, and I start telling a story that you've heard 100 times, and maybe I want to tell it because they haven't heard it. But all of a sudden, in the middle of telling of it, I realize, you know what? I'm tired of this story. And staying current is stopping in mid-story and saying, that's not actually what I want to share with you. What I want to share with you is I don't really know where I'm going right now. So staying current is one of the ways that we listen to ourselves and then let others in. And it's one of the ways we can ask real questions. Because often we repeat stories, and this is something about stories. Often we repeat stories, sometimes because we forget, sometimes, and often as we get older, we think that's what's going on. But more often we repeat stories because the depth of what they carry is too much to digest in one telling. And so we have to tell them again. And that means, as a partner, as a friend, as a family member, that means loving someone is that I need to listen as many times as you need to tell it, even if I get impatient. Because if I might get impatient with the fifth telling, it might be the sixth telling that holds the lesson for me. And I discovered this when my former in-laws, and from a previous marriage, who I had known these people for over 20 years, more 25 years, and they were a farm couple. And when my former father-in-law passed away in his 80s, and I was living in Michigan. I went back to upstate New York to see my former mother-in-law, who was also in her 80s. And I sat with her in the farmhouse where she found her husband. He died in his overalls, getting ready to go out to do the chores in the barn, which is what he would have wanted. And we were alone and we were having tea, and she started telling me of how she found him. Very touching moment. And then we talked about some other things, and then she started telling me about that moment again and again. And I started to think reflexively, oh, well, maybe her grief, maybe she's not lucid. And then I thought, I mentioned I'm now married to Susan 28, 29 years. Well, they were married 67 years.
Wow.
So then I realized in that moment, as she was telling me this moment, maybe the sixth or seventh time that morning, I don't know, I can't imagine what it's like to lose someone you've lived with for 67 years. The moment was too big for one telling. And then I settled in and thought, I will listen as many times as you need to say it. Because it's a profound story to tell. So part of listening is listening past our impatience. If, you know, so that we can get to the deeper meaning. And in terms when we're telling, we have to listen to ourselves so we allow the meaning that we're supposed to digest to keep unfolding, that we stay current. We stay current. I'm tired of this version of this story. Staying current is stopping and saying, I don't know why I keep telling this story over and over again. Can you help me understand it better? This is the vulnerability of our sensitivity. And so there's another thing I wanted to share about relationship that's profound shift. And the metaphor comes from Dante's Divine Comedy, which we're all asked to read way too young in life. And for those of you who are not familiar, I'm sure you've heard of it, but Dante, uh, wrote this amazing epic journey, and he was the first one to write not in Latin but Italian. And in the 1300s, he wrote this epic story, and this is where it begins with what we now call midlife crisis. He finds himself in midlife at a dark wood, not knowing where to go. And the journey takes him. He is suddenly accompanied by an attendant spirit. The spirit or ghost of Virgil hovers and shepherds him. But he takes this journey through hell, purgatory, and to paradise. So there are a couple of things I want to share here that are profound about this. First off, he goes through hell and he sees all these different things. So all of a sudden he sees these two lovers, Francesco and Paolo. And the line is that they are in hell circling in endless identification with each other. Nothing else is said, but that's profound. They're in hell because they're circling in endless identification with each other. So we go through this tremendous journey, which I'll come back to speak to about for a minute in a moment. But we go through all of this. It goes through purgatory, winds up in paradise, and after, hundreds of pages, there's Francesco and Paolo. They're in paradise. They're still circling, but now each of them has a center. And now they're orbiting each other. They're no longer circling in endless identification with each other. This isn't explained. It's just these two things are paralleled across hundreds of pages. And it tells us that hell in a relationship is circling in endless identification with the other because we have no center. And we can still stay as close and orbit each other. But if we have a center, that's the difference between hell and paradise, is having a center and tending each other. Profound. Profound. So let me back up and share about this journey that Dante opens up to us. And I had a mentor, Helen Luke, who's now long gone, and she was a Jungian analyst, and she wrote about Dante's journey. And what she wrote about was she said, this journey from hell to purgatory to paradise, this isn't a climb up a mountain. It's horizontal. This is a journey through consciousness and relationship. And what she framed, she said, hell is actually the cost of false living. Purgatory is the struggle to be real. And paradise is the struggle to stay real. Notice we don't get rid of struggle. And so we are all in our own journeys and in relationship with the moments we fall down and the cost of not being real, the cost of false living, our continuous struggle to be real, and our struggle to stay real, and how we help each other through this. And so there's one more point in this journey that Dante raises, a little story that I want to tell that's profound for each of us and how to be there for each other. So right in the middle of purgatory, smack dab in the middle of this long epic journey, Dante comes upon a wall of fire. And he goes, well, I guess that's as far as I'm going. I'm not going through that. And Virgil, his attendant spirit, hovers over him and says, it is the fire that will burn but will not consume. You must go through it. Wow, Dante takes a deep breath. He goes, no thanks. Virgil gets closer in his face and repeats, it is the fire that will burn but will not consume. You must go through it and I will meet you on the other side. And Virgil vanishes. So Dante, he summons his courage and he dives through the wall of fire. And he's nicked up and there's a little burn here and there, but he's okay. But Virgil is never to be seen again. And there's no explanation. He's gone. Well, how are we to hold this? Did Virgil lie to him? Did he deceive him? And what I think, how I hold it, is that wall of fire is the fire of transformation. It may appear differently and caused by different things in each of us. It could be a loss of identity, or the loss of a dream, or the death of someone, or the loss of a job. Who knows? But every one of us will have to move through the wall of fire. And once we go through that transformation, Virgil is gone because we have become our own guide. We don't need Virgil anymore. And part of this is that, and this again speaks to the work of intimacy, is when we go through the wall of fire, we usually are removed of our argument with life. Every one of us is born with an argument with life. It's not fair. It's this, it's that. I'm healthy, I eat all the right things, and I get sick, and this person's eating hot dogs and drinking bourbon. It's not fair. And often what we do with our loved ones is we have that argument with them. It's not their argument, it's our argument with life, and it belongs with us. So one of the responsibilities of intimacy is to support each other in our argument with life, but not be the surrogates for that argument. This is your argument. Take it up with life in your depth until you go through your wall of fire and you can arrive at your own form of peace and acceptance and make terms with life on life's terms. So I have a small poem of mine that's called Mind as Keyhole. And it goes like this. Above the cloud, everything is light. Below the cloud, everything is gray. Being below the cloud uh, is staying below the cloud is being a victim. Conquering the cloud is being a hero. Seeing the cloud as a cloud is the beginning of peace.
Mm. Wow. Oh, Mark, my soul is just singing like, yes, yes, like every word you speak, you just speak poetry. It is what a gorgeous gift. And this practice of listening, again, it's like deep listening to our beloved and listening for the deeper meaning, the deeper purpose, what they're really saying, rather than listening for analyzing it or what's inaccurate or why they're repeating themselves, like listening for what it must be serving some purpose. And I want to listen to that and witness that. And then also deep listening to ourselves so that we aren't, projecting whatever's going on here on our partner, or blaming our partner for it, or, being in conflict with our partner about something that we're really trying to grapple with inside of ourselves or with life itself. It takes that getting really still and quiet and doing that deep listening. So again, I mean, just like that beautiful keeping a pulse on both of those things. And you describe it just so eloquently and in such a moving way. I just can't thank you enough. Oh my goodness. So I love to ask you, well, this is the Thriving Relationships show, and you've shared so much about relationships. And if you were to say kind of to you, what is the essence of a thriving relationship?
The essence for me, of a thriving relationship is to be wholeheartedly present, holding nothing back, and to listen uh, and to allow the relationship uh, to show us where we're going.
Wow. Allow the relationship. It's this deep presence. And it's like, that's what keeps our hearts so connected to one another and to ourselves and to the moment, keeps our hearts open to really share what's there for us and to listen to what the relationship wants to become, rather than it's so easy, in the fullness and busyness of life, just to operate out of these old, outdated patterns with ourselves, with life, with one another, and instead to listen to what wants to be born in the space of togetherness.
And it's not by accident that the word kindness and kinship have the same root. Kindness leads to kinship.
Kindness leads to kinship. Yes, yes, yes. Oh my goodness, Mark, there's so much I could certainly just ask you questions for the next 10 years. There's just a wellspring of such depth and wisdom and insight and embodiment. I mean, you go into those depths and you bring forth these treasures for all of us. And I'm so grateful that you come up to shore and up to the light to share them with all of us. And for people, your books, I just cannot recommend them highly enough to everyone tuning in. It is an experience to read your writings. They are so moving and so touching and just medicine for the heart and soul, and really speak to the universality of the human experience. So where can people find out more? Where can they follow along? And I know you are in the midst of working on some new. So please share with us what's coming. How can people connect with you?
Yes, I have. I mean, my books you can be found at pretty much everywhere, and my websites, marknepo.com, and where you can find where I'm teaching both, and then online events you can register at live.marknepo.com. So and I usually am doing about 3 webinars a year, and then I'm also traveling and giving retreats and offering retreats and workshops, throughout the year, now that we can travel again.
Wonderful. And we'll put the links for all of those in the show notes below. So be sure to check that out. And is there anything else on your heart, Mark, that you are inspired to share?
Oh, I would just maybe leave us with this small poem of mine that goes like this. It's just one stanza. The mystery uh, is that whoever shows up when we dare to give has exactly what we need hidden in their trouble.
These are ones to breathe with and really sit and be with. Oh, I felt that one. Thank you so, so much, Mark, for your service to the spirit of humanity and for everything you do and all the love you pour forth into the world. And thank you all so much for joining us. And I just have no doubt that hearts and spirits and minds have been so nourished from this conversation. So thank you all so much for doing this time of deep listening and kind of reconnecting so that we can all connect to one another from that deeper place of love. So blessings to all of you. So many blessings to you, Mark, and just infinite gratitude. Love, love, love. Thank you so, so much. And we'll see you next time on the Thriving Relationship Show. Want more support for your relationship or want to become trained as a certified relationship coach to help other couples? We warmly welcome you to head on over to centerthrive.com. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you next time on the Thriving Relationship Show.